Alrighty, so with the season starting to wrap up and Legends of the Force spoilers kind of in full swing, kind of wanted to do a little look back on some of the cards in sets 1 through 4. And you know, what better way to do that than doing a top X list? This time it's going to be a top 20 list of what I think are the best cards in Star Wars Unlimited. Gonna be a for fun kind of video and get some conversation about where these cards kind of dominated over the last few sets. Before we get going, please hit that subscribe button, and if you're interested in some more content from me, do check out my Patreon as well. All right, so this is really an excuse to talk about a bunch of cards. That's what this is. I think top X lists are fun. Maybe you do too. It can generate some conversation, get people to engage, tell me how wrong they think I am or how right they think I am, what cards I should or shouldn't have included here. But yeah, it's for fun, but it also will still be educational, I hope. I'm leaving the bases kind of off the list. I'm just going to briefly touch on them in a moment. Some of them are quite powerful, of course, but I kind of didn't want to include them in this list. There will be an honorable mention section at the start. And yeah, even during this top 20, I think you could rearrange a lot of these cards. Even while I was making these slides, I kept changing the order. So maybe even during the video, I'd want to go back and change it again. But too late now, I'm kind of pot committed. What you will see is that this list is dominated by Spark of Rebellion. It's just a lot from that first set. Sets 2 and set 4 have their fair share, but Twilight, oh boy. Yeah. Alright, so I promised a little bit about the bases, and these are the 3 that I would kind of include in the top list. Energy Conversion Lab, Tarkin Town, and Data Vault. Outside of that, it's usually like the 30 health bases or some like fringier stuff. Colossus is decent, but I think these are really the 3 dominant bases. Energy Conversion Lab, of course, a pillar of the best aggro deck in the game. Tarkin Town kind of single-handedly enables a build style in Quinlan and in Cad Bane. And Data Vault, now probably the most popular of all the bases, has sort of created this new like grind mid-range value town strategy, and it is kind of propping up a lot of different builds. And you know, that 3 health proved to be pretty dominant, and that 10 card deck size increase proved to be not that big a deal. All right, so let's talk about the honorable mentions. First, got 7 cards here. We'll start with the one in the middle there, Plo Koon. This is actually the only card from Twilight of the Republic that I have included anywhere on this list, so you won't see another card from Twilight on the top 20. It's the only one here on the honorable mentions, other than, of course, some reprints. I believe Twilight may have had some reprints of core cards in the set, but doesn't really count. So Plo Koon, the reason it's here and not in the top 20 is primarily because it's kind of only good in one very specific strategy. It is a very important card in like that Quinlan deck. It's not a bad card outside of that. But I also think part of its appeal was its ability to one-shot like 7th health leaders, especially on 5, and that was a much bigger deal when Django existed too. It already kind of one-shots a lot of the 6 health leaders like Rey and Han, so the card's very, very good, and I do expect its play rate may increase in the future, and it might end up being worthy of a top 20 slot, but right now, because it's still a little narrow and niche, I put it in honorable mentions. I put Cham here as well, just because I think this has like really fixed a lot of issues for non-green decks when they are playing against green decks. It's just been a very good card. It excels even more in the Han 2 deck, where you can play it a turn early. Just a good one. Waylay, kind of one of the better removal cards in the game, even though it's not technically removal. You could put Spare the Target here. They're kind of the same card, of course. Waylay almost always gets played over Spare because its ability to target its your own units is actually more valuable than being able to claim bounties. But Waylay, you know, this is a big reason you don't see a lot of like 5 and 6 cost cards that don't do anything when you play them in the meta. Waylay really punishes that kind of unit. Bazine, you know, I think that this is proven to be quite an annoying little card. Villain, of course, does not have nearly the critical mass of hand disruption that heroes do. Heroes have Spark of Rebellion, of course. They have Kira, they have Ahsoka, and all these cards also work better and are more easily enabled in hero with like Force Throw, right? Like Force Throw is another discard card that is just better in hero decks than villain because of the Force package there, which then of course makes Pillage better in hero. So like you see all of that in hero. Bazine kind of carries the whole discard thing on her shoulders in villain and is very good at it. The ability to target, incredibly important. And this also adds a unit into play, unlike something like Spark or Rebellion. You get added synergies with the Underworld. You have the Smuggle upside too. So Bazine, a very good card. I've put Home One and Devastator here as kind of the de facto best top end in green hero and green villain. Devastator actually makes this list and Avenger does not, because I think even though up until set 4 I would have said Avenger was the much better finisher, I think I've kind of changed my mind on that. I think Devastator is like kind of the best villain finisher right now, and Home One of course I think is the best hero finisher and one of the best grinding engines hero decks can have. And the last one on this honorable mentions is Super Laser Blast, primarily because it does something that no other card can do. Yes, Nebula Ignition exists, but Nebula Ignition isn't a very good card. Super Laser Blast does the thing it needs to do. It does it every time, and it is a tool that with, like, if it didn't exist, a lot of gameplay scenarios against villain blue decks would change. So Super Laser Blast makes an honorable mention. Okay, we're going to get into the top 20. So at number 20, I did mention this briefly when talking about Bazine, but we got Kira here. So Kira is a very powerful hand disruption tool in that early mid game against basically any deck. The stats on this unit are good enough that you don't get punished a lot in tempo by playing this. You see most hero yellow decks run this card because it just carries a lot of weight. Yeah, there's not much else to say here. I think this card, the play rate on this card increased over time as more and more people realize just how disruptive this can be to their opponent's game plan. And I would expect this card to continue seeing a lot of play in the future. All right, at 19, I've put Power of the Dark Side on this list, and I think this is still most likely the best one-for-one removal card in the game. Costing 3 is just a really good spot to be in. Most other removal cost 4 and 5, which does just decrease its overall value and utility, especially in those mid turns when you're on 6 and 7 resources. Being able to play a 3-cost card allows you to much more easily sequence plays. Not only that, Power of the Dark Side has no restrictions on what it can defeat, right? It can defeat leaders, it can defeat enormous units. It's a great way to gain back tempo later in the game as well, whereas a lot of other cards like Takedown, Fell the Dragon, they have restrictions, right? Non-leader, or they have to be smaller units, or they have to be bigger units, or whatever it may be. Power's restriction is that it has to be the only unit in play, but the upside here is tremendous. The cost is so efficient. It's a decent turn to play a lot of the time because there's only going to ever be one unit in play most likely, unless people are spamming 1-drops. And yeah, it's just probably the best villain blue removal, and it might maintain that for a while or until rotation. At 18, we've got Wrecker, the Big Smasher, the top end of the best aggro deck in the format. Now, this card, it's this high on the list at 18, or this low, however you want to think about it, because it's often locked in use with ECL. It is a very narrow card. And I know I punish some cards for that. Like I even mentioned, Plo Koon was sometimes a pretty narrow card, and Wrecker is that too, except when this goes off, you often just win the game on the spot. And it is an existential threat when you're playing against ECL aggro in Heroism. It's not a card you see played very much outside of that, especially outside of like an ECL shell for sure. Like you've seen it in like a Han 2 ECL deck. But it doesn't matter, because even though it's kind of best buds with that base, it is best buds with that base. But we got another one, and I put Poe at 17. I put these two cards, Poe and Wrecker, side by side. I think Poe does get the nod here a little bit because he's not as locked to that ECL thing. He's not as locked to the deck archetype of Sabine aggro. Poe has been played in some other lists. He's been played in Quinlan decks. He's been played in like Han 2 decks without ECL, right? This card is a little more reasonable when just played as a 5-cost do nothing because of what it can present the turns after. On top of that, its ECL play is also incredibly impactful. I think the most annoying part about all his effects is probably the defeat and upgrade part, because it kind of, against like red aggro, like let's just call it like Sabine, upgrade removal is so difficult to use against these decks. Things like Entrench, things like Traitorous, Frozen and Carbonite, whatever it may be, are huge liabilities because of this card. And red having not only like an incredibly statted, impactful unit that can basically one-shot any leader in the game, it also has that incidental upgrade hate built into it. It gives these decks outs to cards that may have otherwise been hugely problematic for them. And that's why I've included Poe on this list a little higher than Wrecker. All right, 16. I'm prepared to get some disagreement on this one as to why it's only 16 and not a lot higher on this list, but I've put Cunning here. I think Cunning is a very powerful card in very specific decks. They have to be aggro decks. They have to be mono yellow decks. I don't think this card is particularly good when you're splashing it for 6 resources. And even in some mono yellow-ish builds, like I've thought at times to even play a Cad Bane as a mono yellow deck because you play so few red cards. But Cunning for 4 in that deck was never that exciting because you're not really pushing damage. You're more of a board control centered deck. And Cunning, with all its powerful modes, is just a pure tempo card. It's bounce, it's discard, it's exhaust. These effects are delaying, and especially in conjunction with the +4 damage, they delay your opponent while closing the gap, right? They close that turn gap. They make you kill your opponent quicker so that your delay effects are more powerful. Cunning is probably the best thing at doing this. It's probably the best pure aggro card in the game. Like, nothing can race Cunning. If Sabine could play this card for 4, nothing would be able to race her. But in fact, double yellow decks can often race Sabine because of this card. It does currently get knocked down a little bit just because there really isn't a mono yellow top tier shell for it currently. Mono yellow Han might still be the best version of a Cunning deck, but that card, ever since the banning of DJ, has definitely fallen off in playability. And this list is not purely about what is the best cards in the current meta decks, which is why this has made the top 20 list. It's actually kind of completely absent from the meta right now, but I still think it's incredibly powerful. But 16, not in the top 5 like I expect some people think it is. And at 15, we got the other double aspect card that I'm going to include on this list, and that is Vigilance. And I do think Vigilance is a better card than Cunning, primarily because I think this card is actually good when you pay 6 for it, and Cunning is not. Vigilance, in fact, is played for 6 way more often than it's played for 4. There's a lot of decks that play this card. They're usually hard control decks or like soft control decks. They'll splash this card because kill a unit, heal 5 is a very good thing to do against aggro decks, even when it costs 6. It also is kind of an archetype enabler on its own because of the discard 6 cards for an opponent's deck mode. That is something that kind of creates this fatigue sort of strategy in some decks. But yeah, we don't see this card getting played for 4 very often because mono blue is not a particularly powerful or supported archetype, but the card is absolutely obscene when you do play it for 4. But yeah, I've mostly been consistent ranking Vigilance higher than Cunning. I think the card, for the most part, has just done more for decks than Cunning has. But I put them neck and neck here, side by side. All right, at 14, I've put Cassie Andor, one that may not look so flashy, but maybe the best 3-drop in the game. He's got the stats, he's got the traits, and he has one of the most insane smuggle abilities in the game. This guy lets you rebuild after board control has been established, always lets you get that extra damage. It's a ton of reach. When your opponent, like Super Laser Blast, you bring him out, you hit for 3. When your opponent is exhausted, all of a sudden you can bring this guy out, hit for 3, right? It presents a really annoying threat for your opponent, especially because it doesn't actually cost you a card when you smuggle it. I think sometimes the smuggle on this has actually tricked people into resourcing him early in situations where they shouldn't. He is still a very, very good unit to just play on turn 2 a lot of the time. 3-5. 3-5 is the magic stat line on turn 2. He holds it. He holds the rebel trait. This guy is the real deal when it comes to a complete package. It's aggressively slanted, but also good in like mid-range decks. Just an all-star. And at 13, we got another smuggle card here, and Tech. And this guy has maybe the most busted line of text out of any card here, right? Because Tech says, draw 15 cards sometimes. Turning your whole resource row into your hand is wild, and I am actually surprised this card ended up as balanced as it actually is. It's still incredibly good, but somehow I don't think this is like become like turned into a card that needed to get like suspended, which if you look at this card's text, you might be like, wait, how is this even legal to play? This is insane. Your whole resource row is now your hand. But this game is so tempo oriented that extra 2 cost on those cards really does, limit the viability here sometimes, especially in the early to mid game, right? But Tech as a late game finisher is out of control. We already saw its synergy with the previously mentioned ban card in DJ. Now, Tech's early game usability certainly decreased with the banning of DJ because it no longer has this like 5 resource game over sort of play. But Tech is just so powerful. The fact that it has smuggle itself is also just like really solidifies it as an all-star. And yeah, like this will only continue to get better and better and better. All right, at 12, I've put Ewing Reinforcement, kind of the green hero, mid-range grind all-star. You can get your bomb, you can get 3 little guys. For one action, being able to put multiple units into play is really, really impactful. It lets you search so deep into your deck so you can find utility cards. This card has enabled splashing things like Luke Skywalker in non-blue decks, or like Cad Bane, or whatever off-aspect stuff, right? It can cheat resources through that off-aspect synergy. It can cheat actions by being able to play multiple units. It searches. It's a complete package. It's a very core card right now in hero decks like Han and Rey, and I think it will continue to be a core package in conjunction with the honorable mention card Home 1 and potentially in set 5 with Keller and Beck to create just crazy amounts of board advantage and tempo and unit spam in the future. So hugely powerful card. All right, and now villain's version, sort of, is Darth Vader, and, this is kind of that. This is like the mid-range top end / low end of your controlling top end, and he does also cheat units into play. He can bring out up to 3 with him sometimes, usually it's 1, but he also has that ambush, so he gives you that immediate value. Darth Vader is kind of, for me, always felt like the core, like, finisher, not so much finisher, I should say, core mid-range stabilizer in all villain green mid-range or control decks. I think the card is just so powerful. Ambush, best keyword in the game, most likely, and similar to Ewing, being able to search so far into your deck does allow you to find a lot of utility cards, right? Finding Sentinels, finding Death Troopers, finding TIE Daggers, whatever it may be that will help you in that early game. And playing him onto empty boards really just adds tons of fodder the same way Ewing does. Vader, I can't usually recommend playing these villain green mid-range or control decks without 3 copies. And at number 10, I've put another maybe tame looking one is Surprise Strike, the best, well, second best pump in the game. This is, in a sense, kind of invalidated all other pump effects that we've seen. We've seen so many so many, right, that are similar, right? Maybe they cost 1 and do less damage. Maybe they cost 2, but they have a separate effect, like breaking in, that gives Saboteur, but not as much damage. There's some that are locked to traits. Surprise Strike is just the best one. It's like always the best one, because 3 for 2 is, even though it's not like technically the best rate, right? We sometimes see 1 cost deal 2 damage. That's technically a better rate than 2 to deal 3, but you have to factor in card rate as well, right? This is 1 piece of cardboard that does 3 damage, whereas like Precision Strike, which is like a 2 damage version, is 1 piece of cardboard that does 2. And even though the resource rate is better there, the card rate is just so much better with Surprise Strike. This card is just, this is probably finished off more opponents than any card in the game. And yeah, just if you're trying to swing for lethal, this is the card for you. At number 9, I've got to go with Ahsoka Tano here. This card, similar to Kira, is which was on number 20 on this list, very good disruptive tool. I have to give the nod to Ahsoka here, primarily because of how powerful the synergy is with Force Throw. Not only is this Force traded, which immediately enables the Force Throw, but that redundancy and discard really takes that Force Throw card and elevates its power. Ahsoka, similar to Kira, has a stat line, while not incredibly impressive, is not a huge liability for how powerful this effect is. You even have this incidental ability to sometimes exhaust units. Like, this comes up quite a lot, forcing your opponents to either keep events in their hand that they would otherwise want to resource, or just sometimes brick an entire attack altogether. The card is wildly powerful, works really well with all the other yellow disruptive tools and the red discard tools that we see it often paired with. And going into this next set that is heavily force traded, this will also be enabling the force token base because of its force trait. I think this card is very, very good and will continue to see a lot of play moving forward. And at number 8, one of my favorite little cards, this is Dr. Persing. This is a 2-drop, but it's not really the same kind of 2-drop as a lot of them, right? I haven't included some of the more powerful, like, turn 1 plays in the game when it comes to, like, just pure, like, board advantage stuff. Things like Battlefield Marine and Sabine and stuff like that. But Dr. Persing does something very unique and incredibly powerful. It's one of the few draw engines in the game that I actually like. I think most draw engines in this game are overcosted, and it's why we don't see them played very much. Of course, in conjunction with the fact that you draw 2 cards a turn, drawing is not as much of a premium in this game as it has been in others, but Dr. Persing really takes that to another level and says, nope, you still want me because I still draw a lot of cards or force some really annoying interaction for my opponent. And anyone who's played a Dr. Persing turn 1 and their opponent starts in space knows what I'm talking about. You're like, oh, so this guy's going to ride all game and I'm going to draw infinite cards. And that really does happen a lot of the time. He even has this like weird added synergy that it doesn't have to ping himself. So he can enable, first of all, not just enable, he can survive longer because he doesn't have to hurt himself, but he also enables weird little interactions, like with grit units, for instance, like Hylobon Enforcer and Devastating Gunship. And of course, the leader that it's played the most with, which is Kira, also has grit herself. He enables the super laser tech god, I call it the god curve, where you go Dr. Persing into super laser tech and then immediately kill your super laser tech. You keep a healthy Persing, you ramp, you even get an extra resource that turn if you have something to do with it. This guy comes out of Vader, which is another card that was on this list. So if you're in a grindier game where you don't need like that Sentinel, you can bring this guy out with Vader. Persing is just a very scary card to sit across from when it's played on turn 1 for a lot of decks. He really mitigates hand disruption against villain blue decks because he bulks up your hand. This guy, when he first came out, I was sort of low on him, mostly because I, at that point, was like, well, all the card draw thus far has been bad. Is Dr. Persing really going to be good? Is he going to draw me like 1 card and heal me 3 life? Is that good enough? Well, turns out even when that's all it does, it's sometimes good enough. And Dr. Persing makes the top 10. And number 7, we mentioned it when talking about Dr. Persing, is Super Laser Tech. And we'll get to the other ramp card in a bit, but Super Laser Tech, ramp in general in this game is very, very powerful. I like to think about ramp in this game as being something that isn't punished as much as it often is in other games because of the free leader deploy. So in a lot of cases, you have to ramp, but ramping is such negative tempo, right? You just spent 3 for a 2-1. You then have to spend an action to get rid of this guy, right? It's a pretty negative tempo play with Super Laser Tech and even other ramp cards. But the leader deploy being free means you're no longer locked into this sort of situation where you have to draw that next turn play. You kind of get it enabled for free with your leader, especially when ramp goes to the leader. Ramp notoriously has been at its most powerful with 5 cost deploy leaders, because ramp costs 3, you skip your 4, you go to 5, and you kind of get back all that tempo you lost by ramping on turn 2, because that leader flip is such a powerful mechanic in this game. Getting a free unit with usually very good stats is just it just undoes all that risk you took by playing that ramp card. And Super Laser Tech makes this list in conjunction with a card. Let's not bury the lead. Resupply will be on this list too, but because Super Laser Tech is locked to villain has usually been the color that has done ramp way better, because it's been incredibly consistent. It had 6 cards it could play on turn 2 to ramp with. And Super Laser Tech had the added benefit earlier on in set 1, and maybe even a little in set 2, where people were actually playing 2 health units, and he was sometimes also just trading and ramping. Mostly those days are gone. You do sometimes get incidental value with Super Laser Tech, and let's not diminish the fact that it comes on a body, right? If your turn 2 can do chip damage, and then you play Super Laser Tech, and that Super Laser Tech can trade, you get a lot of value, not just from the ramp, but you actually get to kill a unit. But even though I think in the earlier sets I would have said Super Laser Tech was higher than Resupply on the list, Resupply is going to end up higher on this list. We're not going to need to go super deep on Resupply. I'll mention a few things when we get to it. But ramp as a whole, incredibly powerful mechanic in this game because of the free leader system. And Super Laser Tech is a premium card, and a big reason why villain green decks even do what they do. All right, number 6, Millennium Falcon, piece of junk. We call this Fast Falcon. It comes into play ready. And yeah, this is the beatdown ship. This card single-handedly blocks a lot of space decks from existing. It is also just one of the premium aggro cards in the game. This, of course, we know how powerful this can be in the Han Solo, the Spark of Rebellion version is, because you can play this on turn 1. It doesn't even cost you that extra resource to keep in play because of Han's ability. And it also swallows up every turn 1 space unit your opponent could play, which has really forced deck building into an interesting position, because there are space-centered decks and space aggro decks in existence, or there have been in decks like that in existence, but they've all had to have kind of fallback plans against the Han deck, because being able to play a turn 1 Millennium Falcon is just kind of game crushing sometimes if you have to start in space with a unit that this swallows up. The ability to bounce this back to your hand is also just very powerful. It's a really big upside to be able to just kind of remove it and keep this burst damage out of hand potential. It's one of the best rebuilders out of Super Laser Blast, similarly to how I talked about Cassian, being able to just play readied units and push damage. And of course, it can protect itself from Super Laser Blast with that bounce effect. Now, the card is not always a great card, and in fact, in a lot of cases, it's not a very good turn 2 play in a lot of decks because of its resource swallowing ability, right? Decks that need to be able to play 4 resources on turn 3 often don't want to actually run this card on turn 2. So sometimes it's a bit of an awkward inclusion, or something that you need to think about in your deck building. Well, this isn't really my 3-cost card. I don't want this taking up one of my 8 to 10 3-drop slots, because it's not actually something I want to play on turn 2. This, of course, mostly irrelevant in a Han deck where you're just kind of playing this whenever you want a lot of the time, and you can use his ability proactively with it. But Millennium Falcon, one of the best ships in the game, and just a really core card for these more aggressive slanted hero decks, and has been kind of a nightmare for a lot of strategies for a very long time. All right, number 5. So I kind of teased this when I mentioned Surprise Strike being the maybe not best pump in the game, and that's because Hotshot Blaster, for me, takes that slot. It's not the same kind of pump because this is an upgrade, it's permanent, so Surprise Strike still certainly is the best, like, event pump in the game, but Hotshot Blaster, boy, the smuggle on this is absolutely insane, giving you a mini Surprise Strike that doesn't cost you a card and also leaves behind a permanently buffed unit. This is wild. This is, I think, the best smuggle card in the game, even better than Tech. You know, and it's a yellow card. Don't let that red border fool you. This is a yellow card. You only see this in yellow decks, as you should only see this in yellow decks, I should say. But, you know, that is such a powerful mechanic to have, being able to get a permanently buffed unit. Imagine Surprise Strike permanently buff that unit, right? Like, it's not just the damage you get from this and its action sheet. It's the fact that all of a sudden, okay, you do a 6 damage all of a sudden, right? And your opponent's at 12. 12. They have 12 life. That's so much. But you have this 4 power unit and you hotshot their base for 6. And now you've also created a 6 power unit that's in play, representing lethal for the next turn. Your opponent is now in what we call check. They have to either answer that unit or take initiative so that you can't claim and hit them for 6 and kill them. So this card creates a lot of those check situations. It doesn't cost you cards, right? This smuggle is so powerful because it doesn't cost you cards. It's a free resource in that sense. And, you know, this does have little minor upsides in the fact that you can play this for 1 out of your hand. I've done it before. It doesn't come up too often, but, you know, this is one of the best cards in the game. And it is really a force. All right, at number 4, Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, the 7 cost version of Luke. You know, this is doing heavy lifting. I know I've put Vader was a bit lower on this list. He does a lot of heavy lifting too. The reason Luke is here is because, oh boy, if this card didn't exist, what would we be even doing with Heroic Blue? This guy is just carrying that entire archetype on his shoulders. This is the bomb of all bombs for Hero Blue, and he does it so well. Removal across arena, removal for giant units, and that built-in massive restore. Restore 3 is an incredible amount. It's very difficult to race this card. His stats are better than most of the other 7 cost units that we see, like Vader or Han Solo or Enfys or things like that. He's not the biggest. We've seen a few that are bigger, but yeah, this is kind of why you play Hero Blue. When you're thinking about Hero Blue decks, a lot of what you're doing is thinking about ways to maximize this card. We see that with Rey decks. We see that with Anakin decks. We see it with Han to Blue decks, or whatever it may be, and whatever it may be in the future. Luke, until rotation, is likely going to be like that key 7-drop slot card. That 7-drop slot card in a lot of archetypes is dominated by huge power plays. I just mentioned a bunch of them. Luke right now might be the best of them. Not often the most played. I think a lot has to do with Blue Hero sometimes not being at the top of its game or the top of the meta. But, you know, if it wasn't for him, certainly Blue Hero would kind of be nowhere. All right, at 3, we talked about it a lot already with the Super Laser Tech. I have put Resupply. I think it is the best ramp card in the game right now. Once Super Laser Tech lost its ability to like trade efficiently in the early game, and not only that, a lot of decks don't give you ground targets for Super Laser Tech early in the game. I think all that together has just made Resupply the much cleaner and safer and more tempo efficient play. You don't need to take that extra action to use Super Laser Tech. You just go 3 to 5. That's the Resupply game, and it's so clean in a lot of decks. Some hero decks play it, like Rey. Of course, the Kira decks or other villain green decks will play it. And it is probably just the cleanest, best ramp card in the game. Your hands with Resupply look so much different than your hands that don't have it. And I've mentioned already a lot when talking about Super Laser Tech about how powerful and why ramp is so good in this game. So I don't need to rehash all that. Just say that I think because of how much quicker you just get the ramp without having to do all that extra action minutia with super laser tech. That's why I've put Resupply higher on the list. It goes to number 3. We only got 2 cards left to go over. Guess them now. Force Throw. Number 2, we've got Force Throw, and this card, with the next set coming out with almost every unit and every leader, I think actually every leader and tons of units will have that force trait. Force Throw is about to be just enabled like it's never been enabled before. Of course, its power ceiling isn't going to change. It's already been an incredibly consistent card in some decks, like Quinlan. Churret of old was playing Force Throw in like set 1 when it was like one of the strong decks. But in this next set, kind of any leader that is that you want, you can throw this if you're playing red. Well, no pun intended, but yeah, the card is incredibly powerful, right? 1 cost to potentially do something like make your opponent discard a card and blow up their leader, right? Like, this is the wild ceilings that it has. It has the fact that you can target yourself is incredibly important, because in matchups where that hand, your hand quantity isn't as relevant, a lot of time that's against other aggro deck where you usually can't deploy your whole hand anyway. The ability to just like toss one of your big units and kill one of their premium threats for 1 cost is incredibly valuable. This, in conjunction with a bunch of other hand discard effects that we've talked about, like Ahsoka and Spark, really aims to just kind of destroy your opponent's hand. Force Throw often being the last piece of that whole puzzle, because it usually leaves a very important card or expensive card in their opponent's hand, and then bam, you toss it out of there, kill one of their units, and you get such tremendous value. Now, I don't think all of a sudden with the next set we're going to see that ceiling increase. I think what we're going to see is kind of the floor rise, because there's not going to be very many situations where you have this in your hand and just like, oh, I can't play it because I don't have a force unit, right? If your curve is full of force units, if your leader's a force unit, this is a pretty clean enable. And we might even start seeing villain decks run Force Throw, which is something we don't see very often. We see it a little bit, but the main issue for villain decks has been that the force package in those decks hasn't been that powerful. I also think the villain discard package isn't nearly as powerful or supported as the hero one, which, does lower Force Throw's power in villain decks. Frankly, it's way less good when your opponent's hand is full, and what hero decks do incredibly well is rip out their opponent's hand, right? And that's why Force Throw can reach like incredible heights in those kinds of decks. But Force Throw, it costs 1. The card's insane. We're gonna be seeing it moving forward, and a lot of decks moving forward should be probably looking at this very closely and be like, okay, let's just play the red force package and then work backwards from that. All right, number 1. You probably know what it is already. It's Overwhelming Barrage, and this card's been premium since set 1, and it continues to be premium. It's the best removal in the game. It does so much, right? Like that mid-game board wipe potential, leaving behind a pumped unit so that unit can then trade into something. Late in the game, it can be incredibly important when you have big units in play and you can just like really, really just brick your opponent completely. It works so well with 5-flip leaders, Kira being kind of the main one, but not the only one, right? We've seen it be good with Krennic. We've seen it be good with Bosk. Kind of any leader that can flip on the turn you're going to play this, you have to start thinking about how you're playing around it. As an opponent staring a villain green deck, you have to understand what this card can do to you and the best way you can play around it. And sometimes you just can't. And if they have it, you're just dead, right? And like, this is like against aggro decks, for instance, the games where if you're the aggro deck, like, it's the games where your opponent has this feel like sometimes you had no chance, and the games where they didn't, you felt on top of the world. And a lot of time it can boil down to that. And some leaders, of course, enable this better, Kira being a prominent one because she also halves all the opponent's units, so like that barrage becomes even more deadly. And some leaders that aren't flipping on 5 can still make good use of this. We can see it get played, of course, in like Palpatine decks where like it might not be an early game removal, but it certainly can be a late game stabilizing force. And that pump, that like the fact that that pump, it's not just +2 damage, it's +2/+2 for the turn, means that that unit now is a real threat. Even if he can take lethal damage, he can still stay and play for a turn, maybe potentially trade into something. So it becomes even harder to play around the threat that you've created with Overwhelming Barrage. And, you know, it also has some sneaky game stealing potential. +2 damage means you can attack your opponent's base for +2. And that's a really cute way to finish off your opponent. The world's slowest, and most expensive surprise strike is still sometimes a decent finisher. But yeah, Barrage, if this card didn't exist, we probably wouldn't see villain green decks do very much at all. And, you know, you may think it's completely busted. Maybe it is. It does but right now it is kind of a very important gut check on a lot of things. And I think its existence, while maybe frustrating at times, is probably doing more good than bad in a lot of cases, just because it enables a sort of strategy to exist, something that may have trouble existing if it wasn't for the pure power of Overwhelming Barrage. All right, that's what I got for you. Let me know what you think of this list. Let me know what cards you think I should have included that I didn't. Maybe you think some of the ones that I included are being overrated. Would love to hear it. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. Check out my Patreon if you're into that. And until next time, take care.